Let's go! Hit it! Welcome.
I got a pile of parts. Today, we're going to rebuild a starter in a motorcycle. My motorcycle. I've actually never rebuilt a starter like this before, so this is going to be pretty interesting. I actually took it apart. I should have showed the disassembly on video, but basically you just need to mark where everything is. I lost my marks because I painted it, and carefully disassemble it and inspect everything. The reason why I disassembled it first was so I could determine what was wrong. It seemed like it still wanted to work okay, but it was dragging. So I knew that potentially the brushes would be okay, and that turns out to be the case. Well, the brushes are a little weird, but we'll get into why here in a moment. So you can see that we have everything laid out here. So we have the planets that sit inside here, taking the gear off the end, and then you can see I got the shims. These shims were underneath this gear, so they're sitting here. And then these shims were on here in the back for the rear housing. And then there's a couple of shims on here. I just left these ones on here. And then this bearing actually went in here, and so I took that clip out and slid it out, and they gave us 2 replacement bearings, which I thought was kind of interesting. So what's wrong with this starter? Well, the first sign of evidence, actually for me I found the problem pretty much straight away, but the first sign that something was definitely wrong is if you look at the laminations, you can see that they've made contact and screwed them up a little bit. And if you look here, so this is the brush holder side of the body. We've got a little bit of rubbing on the permanent magnets. So basically what happened is, this is the rear cover. See how that hole's not round anymore? That's the problem. So this starter actually needed a replacement bushing, bearing bushing in the back of the housing here. So you can actually get 2 kits, 2 different types of kits. One is just the brush holder with the brushes, and the other one includes all the bearings and seals and some of the little stuff that is just really handy to have. I opted for the full rebuild kit because I needed it. So yeah, this is all the old parts sitting here. We're going to unwrap the new parts, and we're going to go through step by step on rebuilding this starter. And hopefully this will help someone else out when they're trying to fix up an electric motor or starter of their own. There's a lot of techniques in here that actually apply to DC motors, brushed motors in general. So we're going to cover some of those things. Alright, so I got the bushing out of the back here. Basically what I did was I drilled the hole to the next closest tap size up, which was in my case an M10 by 125. And then I started running the tap down into it, and I was going to actually pull the tap back out and just thread a bolt in, but then I hit the bottom and I figured we'll keep going just a little bit further and see what happens. And after a couple of turns, popped it right out. So using a tap actually I think is the way to go on this, and I don't think it punctured through the back of the housing. No. Yeah, it wasn't in there that crazy. So I'm going to clean this up really good and put the new one in. Here is all the new goodies, unwrapped. Took longer to get this out of the packaging than it did to actually get the old bushing out. And I had never encountered this issue before. Oh well. So basically, there's the new one, there's the old one. That's That's quite the difference. So now we're going to throw this one in. Okay, I haven't put the new one in yet. I'm actually going to heat that up and drop it in, but I'm going to put these in the freezer first. So before I do that, I'm going to go through the rest of this and see what else needs to be put into the freezer. I think this one goes here. Just doing a sizing comparison. That looks right there. It's a little bit bigger on the back side here, which is in line with how that looks. Now I got my new bearing already, it's right here. I actually got two different bearings, so we're going to have to examine these and see what the difference is. Or I should say there's different numbers on them. They could very well be the same bearings though. Okay, so it looks like I need to put that in the freezer. I should say this in the freezer. That goes in the freezer. And I think that's it. Oh, and then we got this one. This doesn't go here, does it? This might actually go here instead. Aw, hell. Yeah, that totally goes there. So do I just not replace this one? I guess not. I didn't include it. I guess that doesn't matter. That's okay. That one's not worn out anyway, so I'm not really worried about it. But we can get this one, and that takes care of the nose end of the motor, because this actually goes on the front of the motor case. Too bad I was too stupid to remember which direction. Oh, because of these marks, that's going to be this way. Yep, see, here's the missing piece of gasket. So this goes like this on top of here. This is why you should really mark things. Like, I painted this so I lost the alignment marks of everything. I'll be able to get it back together without too much of a problem, but you gotta pay attention to that stuff. Especially this and where these shims go. You gotta be really organized and have everything laid out. I should have actually taken video of this when I was taking it apart. Taking video or taking pictures is a great way to reference where things go. But we'll be okay. Alright, so I'm going to chuck these in the freezer. While these cool down, I'm going to get this one out. And then I'll let these soak in some heat for a little while. And we're going to duplicate this brush assembly. God, these brushes look like they're all here. Like, I shouldn't even bother changing them if it wasn't for the kind of knackered surface. They got some grooves in them. So how long will these last compared to those? It's a cheap Chinese starter rebuild kit. I don't know. We'll assemble the other brush holder and see what we get when we're done. I've got some crusty gasket left that I can't get off with just a regular razor blade. Well, without gouging the hell out of this anyway. So I took some of my Durablock sandpaper, my adhesive-backed 320 grit sandpaper, put it on a flat surface, so in this case a steel plate. And what we're going to do is Run it back and forth a few times so she comes out clean. Don't have to push very hard. And I'm rotating every once in a while. See the shit's collected. Oh, look at that! Just like that. Cocked, locked, and ready to rock. I've got to get the pieces from the freezer. Yeah. Alright. Oh. And you. Come with me so you can live. Oh yeah, that's kind of cool looking. Freezes little rings onto the plastic. Okay. Nice and cold. I've already preheated the end, the planets. Anyway, the bushings for them aren't quite ready yet. But we can do the front and the rear bearings. Okay. Take this. Of course, I should have thought to grab needle nose before dropping that in there. Big brass drift. Bloop! Dropped right in.
Very nice.
Now we have this one. Cool. Let those sit, equalize in temperature, and another 15-20 minutes the planets will be ready for theirs, and then we can do something else. Turned out pretty good. They did really fast. Cool, switch to a finer one. Where was this? 320. This 400. That's done before. Pretty good. Said not to use emery cloth. I think I would have preferred emery cloth. That looks nice. Cool. On to the next step. So here are the polished out commutator bars, and as you can see, there's a little bit of crap in between. So the next step is to actually take a pick or a razor blade if you have one, and we need to scrape out anything that's in between the commutation bars. So this is going to take me a few minutes. I will show you when I'm done. There's our polished commutator bars. Ready to rock. I went ahead and put the armature inside the motor case. So we are officially on our way back together. Now we're going to fit the new brush holder next, after I transfer the old screws off of this one. Okay, here's the back half of the starter assembled, ready for the end bell to go on. So here's what I did. I put the brushes in the brush holders first. You have to take a pair of needle nose and you have to twist the clock spring, and when you twist it, it'll actually have full tension against the little arm that sticks out here. You can see that the arm curves in to hook to the top of the brush. And you got to remember that, see the way that the tension is now? How they're a little bit tighter? If I was to put this on 180 degrees out, it would be like a little bit bigger, I guess you could say, because it would be expanding a little bit. You want to make sure that they coil inwards like this. They almost exactly match how the factory setup was. So remember that orientation on your clock springs for your brush holders. And then what I did here was I got my shims on, so I greased the back side of this. I would grease each side of the shim and then slide the shims on. And then I put a little bit of grease here. But what I actually did in here was I put oil. So there's oil around here, and then I put oil down inside there. And the idea is that when I go to put this end bell on, that the grease will kind of seal and trap the oil in here. And so a mixture of the grease and the oil should keep things lubricated. I also got my O-ring on around here, and my trusty old O-ring that I used to install the new one. And for those of you that don't know how to properly install O-rings, or wasn't aware that there is one and only one way to properly install an O-ring, I will show you that when I go to change the nose one. So this is all ready to go. I'm going to go ahead and put the end bell on and flip the starter over. Yay! That sounds pretty good. Just gonna do this a few times, let the commutator bars and brushes meet for the first time.
Mingle a little bit.
It's a little warm back there. Oh, maybe that's
Well, it's still warm from when you heated that up.
from the vise, yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
Alright, now I'm just playing with myself. Alright, now it's time to assemble the nose cone. I went ahead and put the seal in. Now, this part of the case doesn't actually get oil. There's a seal, a little lip seal that goes in the middle here. This is the old one. And you'll notice it's in upside down because this front part of the nose does get oil, and it's sealing against the rest of the starter. So how you put this in, well, you can just grab this and pull it out. You can use a pick set, so you can just hook it behind like this and pull it out. Be careful not to scratch the seat or this surface here that the bearing sits against. And then to drive the seal back in, set it in, and then you find something about the same size. So in this case, I actually used the old seal, and I set the old seal in there like that. And then I took a drift. In my case, I used, I think, actually that piece of brass might work for that. I used, where did it go? Okay, in my case, I actually used a Durablock. And I set it in there like this. And then with my mallet, just gave it some gentle taps. You want to make sure you're fully bottomed out, so that way the seal sits square. And we're really square. So now we're ready to move on to the next step, which actually is going to be this bearing. Now, they included 2 bearings. This kit's supposed to rebuild a few different starters, so there must have been another starter that took 2 of these. Mine takes 1. These are Chinese bearings, and you'll notice that they're sealed on both sides. This is the stock bearing, which is a Japanese bearing, and it's open frame. Or not open frame, but it's open on the back side, so you can see the cage. Now this bearing is really good still. It doesn't really have too much play in it. It doesn't sound like a box of rocks. So I'm actually just going to put the old bearing back in, and the reason why is because it's lubricated here. Okay, our bearing is reinstalled, and it's very important that you oil up the seal. You can see I've lubricated the seal. You don't want to stick it in dry. It'll be like giving your girlfriend the screaming pelican. So we grease this up here, these contact points. Now we're going to shove it through. Work it back and forth. And that's going to take me both hands. Maybe I should take the bearing out. Okay, so I know I'm against the seal. It's the bearing that I was kind of hanging up on a little bit. So I'm going to set this flat like this, and I'm going to find a socket that fits over the inner race and give it a little love tap. A little love tap. See how that works. Use a mallet. There. Finish this off and we'll come back. Okay, here we are back together. It's ready for the planets. Now you'll notice that the bearing has a black seal lip on it. I dented this because I used a socket that was way too big. I used this socket. Should have used this socket because this socket is just barely bigger than the shaft, which means that it would have sat on there without actually denting anything else. So my idiotic move. Now I have to use the Chinese bearing instead of the Japanese one. It still works. Just has a slight noise, dragging noise. So we just threw this in here. Whatever. I'm not going to sweat it. So now we're going to put the planets in. And I'm actually going to put some grease around this, put some grease in here, so that way everything stays lubricated. Because this has the seal and the nose cone, technically the bearing up front is the only thing that really gets lubrication. So this area is going to be dry otherwise. So I'm just going to pack this with a little bit of grease to keep it happy. And we'll put the gasket on and stick it together. Awesome. Okay, we are back together. Now, you don't want to over tighten these screws. My starter actually started to bind after tightening these beyond a certain point, so I got them as tight as possible without really binding the starter up too much. Now it's time to install the O-ring on the nose. This is the old flat one, it's now square. So I'm going to take a broken piece of O-ring and some oil. Lube, 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 lube. Good enough to do this one-handed. Bam. And then I pull this out and notice I didn't even twist the O-ring. That is how you properly install an O-ring on an engine. This is the same way that jet engine technicians would do it. Thank you, Jay, for teaching me that. It has come in handy, especially on the pain in the ass O-rings. This works every time. So now at this point you'll want to test your starter. So I got a car battery here. So now I'm going to put my camera on the invisible tripod. Yeah, let's see what we get. I think that's going to work quite nicely. Alright, now we're going to install it on the bike.
I can already get an idea of what it's going to sound like.
That sounds good.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. I will put the covers back on and maybe we'll fire this up. There we go. Got it running good now. I'm over here.
What's up?
Not much.
You've got a vlog camera. I've got a vlog camera too. Do you want to be in my blog on the internet? I'm on the internet. There.
There.
Now you're in my blog camera too. I've got a blog on the internet. That makes me cool. Someday I'll meet girls this way. You're in the internet. Hi, internet.
It's meeting girls this way, like meeting
This
girls
is how we
in high
meet
school.
girls because we're cool. Because we make blogs. Girls like blogs.
Pretty sweet.
It's cool. What the fuck are you doing?